Today we're out here in the rain taking a look at the 2016 Audi A3 e-Tron. This is Audi's least expensive plug-in hybrid. We do expect to see a wide variety of e-Tron models in Audi's future, but we're starting out right here with the 2016 A3. Up front, the e-Tron definitely looks like one of the Audi family. We have these distinctive Audi headlamps with their daytime running lamp strip inside. We have the very large Audi grille up front as well. In kind of a neat trick, Audi actually hides the charging connector right here behind the Audi logo. There's a small knob right over here in the second ring. We twist that, and it pops open to reveal the charging port. Now don't worry, this charging cover does lock when you lock the vehicle, although it's not quite as easy to use as some of the other charging covers I've seen. Obviously, the A3 comes with an emergency charging cord. That's not unusual in the EV or plug-in hybrid segment. What is a little interesting, though, is this charger. You can see this is quite large compared to some of the other emergency chargers that we've seen. The reason for that is we actually have a display right here and we have a control pad on this charger unit. That's because we can actually adjust the way the vehicle charges right here from the charging display. You can actually set a pin that you need to enter in order to actually charge with this. In addition to that, this is good for 120 or 240 volt charging. So I actually have a 240 volt dryer style plug right here. You can actually plug this one in and charge faster in about 2 hours if you have the right electrical socket in your home. Charging at 110 volts like we're doing right here will take approximately 8 to 9 hours, and charging at 220 volts will take barely over 2 hours. The important thing to remember about the A3 e-Tron when you're comparing it to some of the more mass market competitors is that the A3 is not a terribly large vehicle. At 169.8 inches long, this is about 4 inches shorter than a Ford C-Max Energy and almost a foot shorter than a Chevy Volt. The A3 is closely related to the Volkswagen Golf, the A3 convertible, and the Audi TT as well. That's not a bad thing at all because that group of vehicles are some of the best handling front-wheel drive cars available in North America. The interesting thing, of course, is that this e-Tron system was designed to fit inside this platform in general, and that means that we may actually see it, assuming there's customer demand, in some of the other A3 forms, perhaps even the Audi TT at some later date. Of course, perhaps the biggest thing to know about the e-Tron is that this is the only way you can get the Sportback form of the Audi A3 in the US at this time. If you don't want the e-Tron, then you are limited to the sedan or the convertible. Audi's conservative but elegant styling continues on the rear end. We do have these tail lamps with LED light pipes inside, and you'll notice that this is sort of a hatchback meets station wagon. For e-Tron duty, we don't have any visible exhaust tips. They're all tucked right there under the rear bumper. Although the general theme of the hybrid system in the e-Tron is somewhat similar to what we see in the Volkswagen Jetta hybrid, this is not that same hybrid system. We do use a 1.4-liter turbocharged engine. It produces 150 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque, but that turbocharged engine is really where the similarities end. Instead of a 7-speed DSG, this uses a 6-speed DSG and a larger 102 horsepower electric motor. This is coupled to a much larger and water-cooled 8.8 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. The engine and the electric motor together produce 204 combined system horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. According to the EPA, that combination is good for 83 mpge on the electric cycle and 35 miles per gallon if you're running on gasoline only. The EV range, according to the EPA, is approximately 16 miles, and the whole system together adds about 750 pounds versus a gasoline-only A3. Fortunately, the majority of the weight increase actually happens right back here in the cargo area because that's where the battery is located. So that actually helps improve the weight balance a little bit over the regular A3. The other thing you should know versus the regular A3 is that we get different tires. Those tires help improve economy. Our model has the 225 width all-season tires, but 205 width summer tires are also available. Audi goes down several sizes when they give you those summer tires in order to keep the fuel economy relatively constant with the base model. That means that if handling is a major concern of yours, you should actually get the model with the 225 width all-season tires and just swap in summer tires on your own. Front seat comfort in the A3 is excellent. We have a multi-way power driver's seat with a 4-way adjustable lumbar support in our model. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion. Another handy touch is that the passenger seat has the exact same range of motion as the driver's seat, including that 4-way adjustable lumbar. These seats still don't have a memory function in the United States. However, they are more comfortable than you'll find in the mass market competition like the plug-in versions of the Fusion, the C-Max, and the Volt. Where the A3 really excels, however, is right back here in the rear passenger area. Because even though this is significantly shorter than a Chevy Volt, it's much more efficient in terms of overall packaging. And that means that the combined legroom, which is front plus rear legroom, is right about the same as the Volt. However, because we have this very upright wagon-like profile in the e-Tron, getting in and out of the back is easier because we have this very square door opening, and I have about 1.5 inches of headroom left, even though our model does have the sunroof. It's most noticeable if I move right on over to the middle seat, where I can actually sit comfortably here, and I still have about half an inch of headroom left. Even though the Volt now adds a 5th seat and seat belt for 2016, it's a lot less usable than this because we do have that large battery right here, so there's really nowhere for your legs to go like we do see in the A3. Now, these rear seats do fold down, and they fold completely flat with the rear cargo area. In addition to that, we have a center armrest that's softly padded, has a small storage cubby, cup holders right up front here, and we also have a ski pass-through that folds down from this area and is nearly the same size as the center seat itself. When it comes to cargo capacity, the A3 hatchback performs very well, and the e-Tron model doesn't really take too much away because we don't lose much cargo space. However, we do lose the spare tire. I had no problems fitting a wide variety of luggage items in the back, and these 24-inch roller bags like this will actually fit right there behind the seats in this position, meaning you could put about 4 of them in there very easily. The cargo area is also deep enough that 26-inch roller bags right like this will actually fit in the back. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, the A3 scores very well. We have some very interesting touches back here, like grocery bag holders, and these LED lamps that light up the rear cargo area are actually on little springs, so you can push them in right like that. That means that when you're bopping them with cargo, they're not going to break off. Audi also has some very nice integrated handles on either side of the hatchback that make closing the lid a lot easier. Taking a quick spin around the interior, we do have a sunroof in our particular model with this sort of translucent fabric rather than opaque fabric. That's not necessarily my preference. It does give me a little bit of a headache. We have 4-way adjustable headrests for both the driver and the front passenger. We just press this knob right here. They go forward, backward, as well as up and down. We also have height adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. As we see in the A3 sedan, you'll notice that the front seat does move quite far rearward to accommodate taller passengers or taller drivers, but because of the size of the car, the front door is not quite that large, so the side of your head and your elbow does end up right here on the B pillar. As you'd expect from a luxury vehicle, the majority of the front door panels are soft touch plastic, so soft touch upper portions, soft touch middle portions, and a soft touch armrest as well, although you will find harder plastics lower on the door. Audi uses a very modern looking material for the trim inside the cabin of the e-Tron. This sort of looks like some Nike shoe fabric that's then been placed under plastic. Other than the trim, the rest of the interior style is exactly the same as the Cabrio and the sedan. We have these large air vents. You rotate this ring around to open and close the air vent, and then you just direct the air vent in any direction. In the center of the dashboard, we have this Audi MMI infotainment and navigation system, and this is also where you'll find the ability to change the drive mode in our e-Tron mode. We simply click this EV button right here. You can actually choose between the various options, either with the MMI navigation wheel or just with this button right here. You can actually select between any of those modes. Aside from that, everything else operates exactly the same. We can actually hide the screen into the dashboard with this button right over here. We have our stability and traction control button, hazard light button, park sense button, and then of course the Audi Drive Select system. Below that button bank, you'll find the dual zone automatic climate control system. We have heated seats in our particular model. There's also a 12-volt power port right below that. We have a small storage area right there, and then we have 2 cup holders that are able to accommodate large takeout sodas. However, depending on the size of your takeout drink, it may end up either blocking these buttons or hitting these buttons as you drive. Unlike other Audi models, we still use a traditional console shifter. It's sort of a Cobra head style with the button on the back. Drive is all the way back. We click it once more back for the sport mode. You can toggle between that just by clicking back there in that fashion. Over to the right for the manual mode, up for up, and down for down. This is also where you'll find the start-stop button and part of the Audi MMI system control. This is the volume power knob and track forward-backward. So we simply toggle this side to side for forward-backward. The rest of the MMI controls are below the shifter, so we have direct access to navigation, telephone, radio, and media with these toggles. Then we have contextual buttons that change based on what screen you're on inside the system. This Audi MMI control knob does not toggle around or side to side like you see in BMW's iDrive. However, it does rotate around, and it does support finger writing recognition right in the middle. It also clicks down to enter. We have a menu button and then a back button as well. Continuing back from that, we have an electric parking brake, and then we have a softly padded center armrest that does ratchet into position. It also slides forward and backward to make it a little bit more comfortable for taller or shorter drivers. It opens up to reveal a moderately sized storage cubby right there, and then we still have an Audi MMI specific interface for your smartphone. You can use the USB port right here, but it is charge only. So if you want to have your media device connected, you do have to use this particular Audi specific cable. Since no green vehicle would be complete without some unique instruments, we get those over here on the driver's side. Instead of a tachometer, we have a power gauge. Below the needle is the charge zone, so of course the further down it goes, the more your regenerative braking. And then we have an efficiency zone, a power zone, and then interestingly enough, beyond the 100% we have the boost zone. So in theory, when the engine is producing 100% of its power, that's when the needle would be right there at 100. And then if you floored it and you get the extra boost that the electric motor is giving you, it would then go all the way to max. We also have a separate battery gauge and a separate fuel gauge, and of course a speedometer over here on the right. The color multifunction display is controlled via these buttons over here on the steering wheel. We have a page option button, a page change button, and then we use this scroll wheel to scroll through the options on each page and click down to OK. In this screen, you can see the status of your e-Tron system. You can also choose your onboard computer, tachometer, digital speedometer, etc., or a reduced display mode. The onboard computer is your fairly typical onboard computer. We of course get the range of our system both in gasoline miles, which is at 125, and the EV miles, which is down there right at 7. In addition to that, we have our clock, average fuel economy, all that sort of thing going on here as well. There's also a Bluetooth telephone interface that allows you a limited set of commands versus what you can see in the dashboard with the Audi MMI system. And we also have this navigation screen. Because we don't have a destination entered in here right now, it shows us the street that we're currently on as well as a compass rose. We have a few options. We can turn the compass on, off, turn voice guidance on or off, or have it navigate us back home. Even in e-Tron form, we still get the same sporty Audi 3-spoke steering wheel, sport grips on the bottom, sport grips right up top as well. The controls I showed you earlier are over here on the left side, and then on the right side we get volume up, down, mute. We get a favorite programmable button that you can have do a wide variety of different system functions that's programmable inside the MMI system. You get a nav button right over here to repeat your last navigation instruction, and a voice command button as well. You'll notice that we don't have any cruise control buttons on the steering wheel. That's because those are on a stalk right here below the turn signal stalk. Again, one of the most important things to remember about the e-Tron is that this is the only way you can get the hatchback or wagon version of the A3. The twist to that, of course, also means that at this time there is no e-Tron version of the A3 sedan or the A3 Cabrio. This is the only way that the e-Tron comes. In some ways, this slots between General Motors' Voltec and Ford's Energy products in terms of the way this behaves out on the road. Because unlike the Chevy Volt, performance is definitely lower when we're driving this vehicle in EV-only mode. However, the difference is not as large as we find over there in the Ford Energy products. When driving the e-Tron in electric-only mode, we do get slower 0 to 60 acceleration. When we're driving this in hybrid mode, it ran from 0 to 60 in 7.5 seconds, slotting it sort of between the 1.8-liter turbo and the 2-liter turbo version of the A3 sedan. The big thing about the A3 e-Tron is that we have that 100 horsepower electric motor and a decent amount of torque. That means this can drive at highway speeds up to around 80 miles an hour, and even climbing hills like this, we can do this without a problem in the EV mode. Now obviously it's still going to be slower than when we're operating in hybrid mode, but it's still going to feel like a traditional Audi product. That's because Audi is still sending the electric motor's power through the 6-speed dual clutch transmission. And that means this is going to still shift like a traditional car. It has that very traditional Audi feel out on the road. Audi gives us 4 different drive modes. The first one is pretty easy to explain. It's EV mode. As long as there's sufficient charge in the hybrid battery pack, it's going to operate in EV mode up to about that 80 miles an hour, unless you floor the car and really demand more power than the electric motor can give you. The next mode is hybrid mode, and that's probably my favorite mode, especially if your commute is a little bit longer than 16 miles. That means that this vehicle is going to start out as an electric vehicle, but if you press the throttle perhaps more than about a quarter of the way, it's going to engage the gasoline motor. In that mode, the system is trying to give you the best fuel economy by augmenting the engine whenever possible with the battery, but it's not trying to be a pure EV. Next, we have a hold mode, which will let you reserve the entire battery if you want to for EV operation later. This is very similar to what we see in the Chevy Volt. The last mode is charging mode, and that's very similar to the mountain mode that we see in the Chevy Volt. That's where this vehicle is actually going to try and charge the hybrid battery pack using the gasoline engine. This allows you to have energy banked up later if you do plan on going up very steep hills at high speeds, where you would need that extra oomph to help augment that 1.4-liter turbo. Again, because comparisons are a little bit difficult when it comes to acceleration, I'm going to give this a B+, because this does slot between the 2 different Audi A3 models. This is going to be a little bit faster than a Chevy Volt, which did 0 to 60 in 8.13, and a little bit slower than the Ford Energy products, which do it in around 7.1. The big reason that the Energy products are a little bit faster than this is because they use a different kind of transmission. Instead of using a traditional 6-speed transmission, they are using a planetary power split device that tends to be a little bit more efficient in terms of acceleration. When it comes to braking, I'm going to give this a B-. The brakes in the A3 are just not as smooth as we see in the rest of the competition, and most of that problem has to do with the regenerative braking. The reason for that is the position of the motor, because again, power does go through the transmission on its way to the wheels. That means that this transmission has to keep downshifting as the vehicle is slowing down, and that does affect the feel of the brakes. Even though Audi has done an excellent job, I think, of trying to merge those two things together, it is still not as smooth as we see in the competition. In the Toyota and Ford systems, the electric motor is basically connected to the wheels at all times, and that means you have very, very smooth regenerative braking. It's most noticeable when we're going from perhaps mild braking in this vehicle to moderate to severe braking in the vehicle, and then it can feel a little bit disconnected. In terms of overall stopping distances, this ran from 60 to 0 in 127 feet, and that is a little bit longer than the regular A3 sedans that we've tested, likely because of the extra weight as well as the tires that we have on this model. When it comes to handling, I'm going to give this an A. Now keep in mind that there is relatively little to compare this with, but this does feel an awful lot more engaging than the Ford Energy products or the Chevy Volt. This has a very solid Germanic feel to it in terms of overall steering feel and the communication from the road. This feels very much like the regular A3 products. Now the overall grip is definitely lower than we see in the regular A3s, again because of the tire choice and the extra weight. Thanks to the extra weight and the way that Audi has tuned the suspension, I'm going to give the ride an A as well. Now this ride is definitely a little bit floaty-boaty when you compare this to the regular A3 because there are no sport options available in the e-Tron. When it comes to cabin noise, I'm going to give this an A. Again, there's very little to compare this to, but this is quieter than the Fusion Energy, the C-Max Energy, or the Chevy Volt. When it comes to fuel economy, I'm going to give this a B. The MPGe rating when this is operating in EV mode is not terribly high. You will definitely find more efficient EVs out there, even from luxury car companies. On the flip side, however, when we're operating in gasoline-only mode, fuel economy has been surprisingly good. On days when I have not charged this vehicle, I've been averaging about 39 to 41 miles per gallon, and that is solidly above what the EPA says you're going to get. According to the EPA scores, you should be averaging around 35 miles per gallon, and this again has been beating that by a wide margin. In a way, the terrain that I commute on is likely playing into the high fuel economy figures, because I do drive on these winding mountain roads like this, and I go up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass as well. And unlike other regular hybrids, there is enough capacity in this battery to actually keep regenerating the braking all the way down the hill. Almost all of the regular hybrids out there just don't have the battery capacity required to do that, and so they would run out of battery capacity and they'd stop regenerative braking about a quarter of the way down the hill. This allows you to save all that power and then use it later. Overall, this is not quite as exciting as a regular A3, but the difference isn't huge. This just feels like a slightly muted A3. We get an awful lot of wheel spin, which is an awful lot of fun from a stop, but overall, the rest of the driving experience in the A3 e-Tron just feels like a regular A3 with slightly less sticky tires. The A3's price tag is really what puts this in a category all to its own. For $37,900, the base model is fairly well equipped with standard xenon headlamps. If you want the LED headlamps like our particular model has, the next step up is $42,000. The top end trim starts at $46,800 and ends below $50,000. That obviously means that the A3 e-Tron is going to be more expensive than something like a Toyota Prius, a Chevy Volt, or a Ford C-Max Energy, or a Ford Fusion Energy. However, interestingly enough, the price delta between this and the Ford products is not that large. True comparisons with the e-Tron are quite difficult because Mercedes and BMW, the two closest competitors to Audi in general, don't have anything like this in the US at the moment. Mercedes does have the B-Class electric vehicle, but it's not a plug-in hybrid, it's just an electric vehicle in the US. They also have the CLA, which is the direct competitor to the A3 in general, but there's no plug-in version of that in the US at this time. On the BMW side, it is a little bit more complicated because BMW is not bringing their 2 Series Active Tourer to the US, and that would be the closest competitor, especially to this A3 hatchback. Instead, what BMW does in this market is they jam a less powerful engine in the 3 Series and sell it for about the same price as the Audi A3. That would be the BMW 320i. Now, there is a gasoline electric version of the 3 Series at this time, but it's considerably more expensive than the e-Tron. Even if we expand this pool outwards to other luxury brands, comparisons are really no easier. Lexus does have the Lexus CT200H, which is perhaps the closest competitor to the e-Tron, but it's not a plug-in hybrid, it's just a regular old hybrid. It also has the last generation Prius drivetrain under its hood, so it's significantly slower than this. Not only is the CT significantly slower, it doesn't have the same sort of engaging feel we find in this model either. Expanding out from there, every manufacturer out there seems to have some sort of plug-in hybrid, but they're not the same kind of thing as this. GM, of course, has that plug-in Cadillac ELR, which is a 2-door sports coupe. We then have the Chevy Volt, which is a 4-door sedan-like car. Volvo has the XC90 T8 plug-in hybrid, which is a very large 3-row crossover. BMW has a wide variety of things, from the BMW i8 to the i3 and now the new BMW 330e, but none of those are the same sort of thing as the A3 either. Now that said, even accounting for the tax credits that you'll find on this A3 e-Tron, this is going to be a decent bump over those traditional hybrids in the mass market segment. It's also going to be fairly similar to some of those other hybrid options out there, like the Infiniti Q50 hybrid. A fully loaded C-Max Energy will set you back right around $36,000. Again, this starts just about $1,900. More than that, you not only get a luxury brand, but you get a little bit more comfortable interior as well. Overall acceleration performance is not that much different between the Audi and the Ford Energy products. However, the feel is very different. This has a much more traditional feel thanks to its 6-speed automatic transmission, and the overall handling nature of the A3 is definitely more engaging than we find over there in the Fords. Chevy's Volt is less expensive than the A3 e-Tron, but this is a little bit more traditional in its overall style. It's a little bit more conservative, a little bit more luxurious. Obviously, the brand name is something that's going to cost you more because this is an Audi versus the Chevy brand over there on the Volt. In terms of overall comfort level, this definitely excels over the Volt. We have more comfortable front seats, we have a more comfortable and more usable back seat. The way they behave out on the road is also very different, because this, very much like the Ford Energy products, behaves differently whether it's operating in EV-only mode or in gasoline mode. Although the EV-only performance of the e-Tron is closer to its gasoline performance than we see over there in the Ford Energy products, the Volt operates basically the same whether it's operating on gasoline or electricity. There's really almost no performance difference. In this one, again, there is definitely a difference. The other sort of sideways comparison out there is the BMW i3. It starts at about $42,400, but it comes as either an EV only or an EV with a range extender, and those two things are very different than what we see in the A3 as well. The electric-only i3 obviously has no gasoline ability like we see in this model, and the one with the range extender goes 80 miles on battery and then 80 miles on gasoline. It has a very, very small gas tank, so you have to stop and refill with gasoline about every 80 miles if you want to keep on driving gasoline only. When it comes to tax credits, you should know that the government agencies seem to be changing the way tax credits work for EVs and plug-ins. This now qualifies for just over $4,000 in federal incentives. That is subject to change. Of course, it's also subject to your tax situation. Depending on the state you live in and your tax situation, you may also qualify for some additional tax credits in your state. And lastly, you should know that the carpool stickers that allow you to drive solo in carpool lanes in certain states have limited availability, and the future of them in California is a little bit unknown at this point. We seem to have already hit the limit of the number of stickers that California planned to give out, and they don't know whether or not they will be extended or whether or not there will be more stickers issued. So it is a little bit of a dice game there. Which vehicle is right for you really depends on how much you value that plug-in portion, the electric-only driving portion, and how long your commute is. If you have a relatively short commute, you'll be driving primarily electric only in the Audi A3. If you have a somewhat longer commute, then you'll actually be getting very similar fuel economy in this A3 e-Tron as you find in the regular Audi A3. The regular Audi A3 gets some really incredible fuel economy, especially with its base engine, and I was averaging right about the same in that model as this model, even though again we have been beating the EPA estimates by a few miles per gallon in this. The other consideration within the A3 family, of course, is that this is not an all-wheel drive vehicle, and you can get Audi's Quattro system in the other versions of the A3. Personally, if I were shopping in this particular segment, I would actually get the regular A3. The A3 is again one of my favorite entries in this particular segment. I would take the A3 over the GLA. I would also take it over the BMW 320i, to be perfectly honest. Now that said, if you are looking for a luxury upgrade to something like a Volt, a C-Max, a Fusion, or even a Toyota Prius, you should definitely put the A3 e-Tron on your shopping list. For the average commuter, this is going to get very similar overall fuel economy to the Toyota Prius if you do plug it in and drive those first 16 miles on electric only. Afterwards, obviously it's going to get lower fuel economy than the Prius, but interestingly enough, it's very similar to the Fusion, the C-Max, or the Volt. Audi has not said what vehicles will be getting their e-Tron system in the future, but we do expect to see an e-Tron version of the Q7 soon. Personally, I'm holding out for the A3 Cabrio e-Tron because the A3 Cabrio is one of my all-time favorite vehicles, and I wouldn't really mind having this system in that car. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes with the 2016 Audi A3 e-Tron. Go ahead and check out those related videos down there. Find me over on Facebook, like this video, comment down there on what you think about the 2016 e-Tron. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you next week.